always bring foreigners to the schools, like orphanage, kids performance, stuff like that, as an example of how good the education system is. Maybe they believe it's a way to show the outside world that students are very polished. The opening ceremony, it's like a very fancy apartment complex that they built for like the maybe luxury citizens to cover over the fact that there are quite strict rules. That's like just typical countryside houses, pulling things. They don't like those kind of things. Sometimes they do ask you to delete the videos, and there are some issues you just can't touch. The leaders. We were told when we got into the bus there are some special characteristics. One of them we were instructed was if we get a newspaper, like 노동신문, we are not allowed to fold the newspaper if there's a photo of Kim Jong-un. My name is Charo Carroll. I am a journalist focusing on North Korea, founder of a site called NK News. I have been living in South Korea since 2016, January. I visited to North Korea 5 times from 2009 to 2018. I came to South Korea first in 2013. I went to Nonsan, to a place called Kumgang-dae학교, 3 months to do an intensive Korean class. I had quite a long history with South Korea. My grandma, she owns a large house in Dublin in Ireland. Rented her house to South Korean embassy. So the South Korean embassy was based in my grandma's house when I was a kid. She lived next to the Korean embassy. So like when I was a kid, I would look over the wall and I'd see like, you know, Korean officials in my grandma's garden or in the house. So from a young age, I was kind of had known what South Korea, but I didn't go until 2013. I've taken Taehanggong many times, Koryo as well, quite a few times. The most interesting thing, Koryo has a bad reputation. Actually, the only airline in the world that has a 1-star. The thing is, when you fly it, it's actually pretty good. Better than a lot of European budget airlines. You get a meal, full service airline, like flag carrier airline. But when you get on, there is one key difference, which is just as you're getting ready to take off, the video talks a lot about the great leadership of Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un, the wisdom of the Juche system. Yeah, this is the video I was talking about when you're taking off. They have these like propaganda videos. This is Chosunjungang television playing a kind of propaganda video that's being played over the in-flight TV system. You can't choose a movie. The first huge difference, you're going to a very different country to what you're used to. You get burgers on North Korean airline for some reason, but you get bibimbap, usually on Korean Air. Yeah, that's the burger. People always say, what's the meat inside it? Some people don't really know. I actually don't know is it beef? Is it pork? I don't know. I don't know if this one there was meat or not. It doesn't look like it, right? Yeah, I remember the one that does have meat. I remember it was okay. I think a part of the reason is like after being in North Korea for a week, want more Western food after if you're a foreigner, and so like having the bread and like the cheese and it's quite nice after a break. So one big other difference is that on the Korean Air you get there's a in-flight shop that sells a lot of like luxury products. In North Korea, all those luxury products are banned due to global sanctions on North Korea. The airport was constructed or renovated around 2014, 2015. Pretty modern now, to be honest. Duty-free shops. Everything is in English and Korean and Chinese. One time stuck there for like 9 hours. We couldn't leave Pyongyang for some reason, and maybe 100 journalists, we were just stuck for so long, and we all had a lot of beer to try and spend the time. But you know, these days the airport is also used for missile tests. So that airport that we leave from, they regularly test the ICBM missiles from the same runway. So a lot of the big missile launches you see on TV are being fired from the runway. They bring out missile launchers and test how high they can fly. There's no video of it, sadly, there, but those are some of the older North Korean transport aircraft there, the cargo planes. Of Incheon Airport, I was impressed like how large it was. There was a lot of aircraft there. It was very different to Pyongyang International Airport. Pyongyang has about 2 flights a day. maybe 3 flights a day if you're lucky, and Incheon is like hundreds per day, completely different. To get the bags, North Korea was quicker because South Korea, when I used to fly to Incheon, it was actually very inconvenient. About 10 years ago, before there was all the automated gates, often foreigners had to line up maybe an hour or something like that. And in Pyongyang, like I said, it's just 2 flights a day maybe, so it was quite quick. We were told when we got into the bus, there are some special characteristics to visiting North Korea, and one of them we were instructed was if we get a newspaper, like Norong Shinmun, we are not allowed to fold the newspaper if there's a photo of Kim Jong-un. Back then it was Kim Jong-il, I went in 2009, but you can't fold the photo of him because it would be like disrespectful to Koreans that if you do that to the photo. They tried to pretend it was like you're visiting a normal country. They didn't tell us some warnings that we knew existed. For example, when you're going to North Korea, if you go to the hotel, you can't just walk out of the hotel and go like running, for example, or like do a jog. You have to be accompanied at all times. But the bus, they didn't say that. They just overlooked that topic. And I think I remember raising my hand and saying, excuse me, can I go jogging? The thing they always do is they have some fake excuse, like, oh, Mr. Chad, yes, you can go jogging, but there's going to be no time, it's such a busy schedule. Or often you would say, oh, there's a restaurant there with loads of local people, can we go? And they'd say, there's no time right now, or under renovation, these are just construction workers. Like, there's a lot of manipulation of what you're seeing to cover over the fact that there are quite strict rules. And I think the guides are aware that the rules are very unusual. So rather than just say, hey, you can't do this, it's against the rules, they make some kind of false excuse. Yeah, that's like just typical countryside houses, and I don't know if they have rules then, but I think now, last time I went, they just didn't want us taking photos out the window so much. They were like, Mr. Chad, why are you taking so many photos? Why are you taking a video? Don't you just want to take photos of nice things? Like, there's a lot of that. They don't like that. Those kind of videos they don't like. Anything that shows North Korea and the country looking developing. For example, in the countryside, if there's like cows that are pulling equipment or machinery, they try to stop you filming it. On the streets, if you see old people moving like boxes or pulling things, they don't like those kind of things. Sometimes they do ask you to delete the videos. And I always told them, like, why are you stressing? Like, you see this in South Korea, you see it even in Japan sometimes. If you go to the countryside, and I always say to them, look, we are just trying to be objective. We don't have any agenda. We're not here to promote you. We're here to just report the facts. But sometimes they do get upset with how we show some things. Yeah, and there are some issues that are you just can't touch. The leaders, you can't. And then I realized, like, experiences like that kind of taught me that this is the same level of respect they have for Kim Jong-un as if you go to Saudi Arabia and you're talking about Allah, the god of like Islam, right? You can't draw a cartoon of Allah, you can't mock him. It's exactly the same with Kim Jong-un and the Kim family. It's like a very religious kind of feeling, and I learned that it's very sensitive to them. But the crazy thing is, the people in the city very rarely see this. There are so many travel restrictions that if you're in the city, you often can just never visit the countryside. And the vice versa, Pande. Country people, very difficult to go to Pyongyang. Maybe once in your life or maybe twice if you're lucky. For example, when we were in Pyongyang on the last trip, 2 days of free time. So I said, why don't we go to Wonsan? The guide said to me, like, Mr. Chad, we can't do things like that. We can't just decide to visit the countryside. You have to have a plan many weeks in advance. And then I learned that, like, he also was not like able to regularly visit Wonsan, even as like a guide with a good job in Pyongyang. It's really crazy how many rules and restrictions there are. Journalists normally only get to see Pyongyang. We never get to go out of the capital. Tourists, however, are usually can see many parts of the country. So I was a tourist. First 3 years, I went to Wonsan. In the Wonsan harbor, I think they're grilling. It's just regular barbecue. This is a really interesting dish in North Korea. They do a lot for tourists. They grill the clams using hibalyu with gasoline from a car, and then they just burn it, and then you eat it. It wasn't a great taste. I worried a bit about the health consequences. 영국거리 is like a big street they built into the opening ceremony. It's like a very fancy apartment complex that they built for like the maybe luxury citizens, like high-end citizens. The funny thing is like those buildings, some of them are like 60 floors high, and my guide was joking to me that if you live at the top, because of the electricity problem, it's very cumbersome because often there's no elevator, so you have to just go up. Maybe there's power like a few hours a day for the elevator, but like if you're coming home late or it's the middle of the day, you might not be able to get it. Those are very common in Pyongyang, just like the normal streets have buildings around those kind of heights, and it will be apartments with like shops on the first floor. That's very common. The photos we're looking at now give a bit of false impression. Center of the city, and they do make efforts to light it up well at night, but a lot of it switches off around 10 p.m, 11 p.m. It gets very dark. But if you go to the non-central part of the city or countryside, it's extremely dark. This is quite an unusual and non-representative picture of what it's like in North Korea at nighttime. This neighborhood that you can see in this referred to as Pyonghatan, like Manhattan, because it has a lot of the big buildings, a lot of the bright lights. So this was not me. My cousin went to North Korea. She went 2017 and she shared the videos. Somehow she got to go to the wedding, somehow invited to a wedding. I guess like 결혼식장? It's very unusual. For a tourist to be in a wedding in North Korea is very unusual. She was quite lucky to experience this, I'd say. Perhaps there was a wedding going on while they were staying there. That would make sense. Yeah, when you go there for the first time, that's one of the things that stands out is the loudspeakers throughout many public places in the city, and they play North Korean music, which is foreigners often has a kind of slightly eerie sound, like a kind of like ghost music kind of sound. Also in the morning, citywide kind of alarm, which is like around maybe 6 or 7 a.m. you can hear like music being played throughout the whole city. 출근 시간. Yeah, time to go to work. That was the biggest shock for me, is if you see videos from like 2002 or like 1990s, it's very empty, but it has got a lot more traffic as the country's developed more, but to own a car is very rare. Public transport is used by most people, like subway, very, very cheap. There's also like bus service and trolley bus service and tram in the morning, like a lot of people squashed in. I mean, it's kind of like Seoul, right? If you go on the like rush hour. All the stations are very pretty. They like have decorated kind of socialist style. The tourists were always taken to the subway. We always were taken to just 2 stations. For so long, people thought that it was a fake subway system because Westerners only saw 2 stations, and so kind of rumor spread on Google that North Korea is lying, it's just pretending that it's got a subway system. But it really does. There is a full system, and it's one of the few places that you just regularly encounter people who are going about their daily business. Did an interview with a young lady, talked about fashion, about the inspiration for her outfit, because she didn't look very like socialist to me. She was like, had a like kind of Gucci bag, and she really struggled to answer the question because she knew we're filming and she knew the guides were there. She had to say the right thing, and the only right thing to say is that you're following Kim Jong-un's like guidance. Socially educated to say the right thing, and it doesn't really fit with the socialist concept to have like these luxury products. So it puts them in a very awkward position when you ask them to explain it. And you can see there's a bicycle renting stand. Interestingly, I don't think this ever started. Like, I don't think it ever launched as a service because we never heard, and I think it was just like an experiment they did. But you can see the ad. See, the ad is like guns. The Shinudong, they were not there when I first arrived. I think maybe due to power problems. So there's very famous, there's North Korean traffic cops control mechanism for a long time. And many tourists made these videos because they kind of like robots, they turn around so quickly, and 10, 15 years ago there was a lot of these. But in the countryside, often so little traffic, the need for it is quite minimal. Do you see cows moving equipment? They always bring foreigners to the schools, like orphanage, kids performance, stuff like that. I don't know, but it's often on the itinerary for tourists. As an example of how good the education system is, maybe they believe it's a way to show the outside world that students are very polished. 주체 사상? They have the Juche Tower in Pyongyang, talk about it all the time, but foreigners just don't have 관심이 없어요. It's not interesting for foreigners. I think for the North Koreans it's not interesting either. It's like, because it doesn't really make any sense as an ideology. There are so many books in North Korea about it, so much written, but very convoluted theory, but they're very proud of it. They're also, I think, starting to change. They have this Juche calendar and they've stopped using it recently. So I think they're beginning to phase out. Foreigners can sometimes go to these like public parks on a national holiday, public dancing or singing. Orchestra in North Korea. It's heavily influenced by the Soviet Union, right? Which brought in a lot of Western musical instruments. It's definitely got a big Soviet influence on it. There used to be roaming data. You could buy SIM card, North Korean SIM card. It's extremely expensive. 20만 won, yeah. And then 100 megabytes was maybe like 5만 won for megabyte, so it would go very quickly. So you had to be very careful how you used it. But the first time I went, there was nothing. They took your phone when you arrived. You could maybe use an international telephone in a hotel, but someone's probably listening. It was mostly impossible to communicate. No, there's no internet. I mean, there is some internet, but it's mostly intranet, like internal network. So that all goes back to Kim Dae-jung 대통령 Inter-Korean Cooperation Economic Exchange. During that time, South Korea sent buses, it sent trucks. Some of them still are there in North Korea many years later. But it's quite unusual for you to see Hyundai sign without it being like scratched off. They normally like delete those. They don't want to make it publicly known that South Korean machinery and equipment is in North Korea, especially now because January of 2024, Kim Jong-un formally abandoned reunification as a goal of the two Koreas and said that South Korea is now always our enemy, should not trust them. So I think the pressure is probably grown on deleting signs of South Korean culture as much as possible. One strange difference I really noticed, if I tell you that one of the Koreas, apartments that all look the same, they're all white color. Another Korea has buildings that are very colorful and much more diverse architectural styles. Which Korea do you think I'm talking about? Yeah. If you told me like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that the colorful one is North Korea and the very bland white one is South Korea, I would have been like, that doesn't make sense, because we think of North Korea as more controlled, more uniform, more strict. Actually, the architectural style is much more diverse in North Korea. They invest a lot in the city, very strong colors. And sometimes when I'm driving from Incheon airport to Seoul, I look around out the window, I'm just like, what? How did they I never really understood it, why South Korea is so conformist, why everyone wants to live in an apartment that looks the same as their neighbors, or, yeah. Very cold, very cold. Yesterday I went running outside with some friends, -10, I think. Yeah, at Gwanghwamun. Since 2016, January 2016.
When was your first visit to North Korea?
2009, August 2009. It's like nice weather actually, not like Changma had finished.
When did you decide to go to North Korea?
So I was in university studying a master's program in a subject called non-proliferation and international security. Non-proliferation is like piekwa, like denuclearization. Obviously, North Korea is an important case study. Became very interested in North Korea as a student. It was raining one day in London, watching YouTube, and then I found a documentary about North Korea, which I watched, and I have to go. So different to what I'm used to. In August 2009 on a tour for about 9 days, 10 days with a good friend of mine and some other friends. I think I was 25. Literally changed my life. Like, I don't think I would be sitting with you now. Very mild anxiety about going, but actually it seemed quite safe compared to going to like Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere where you have a real threat of terrorism, bombs going off. Like, North Korea is very controlled and strict. So the chance of dangerous accident or incident seemed quite low. We actually took a train from Beijing to Dandong and then Dandong to Pyongyang. It's like a 24-hour train journey. You get to see the countryside, and we drank a lot of beer on the train with local Koreans. And yeah, 대동강 맥주. 감사합니다. I presume it was 대동강 맥주, the main beer of North Korea, right? Even in South Korea, one time I was in Mokpo, wanted to go back on Mugunghwa instead of KTX because I quite like the slow train, just like seeing countryside, and you can meet and talk to like some ordinary country people versus KTX, like everyone's quite, looking at a laptop or like, and Mugunghwa, like as you might remember, it used to have like noraebang room and restaurant, not anymore, but like 10 years ago it did. I like the long train journey, but we did Koryo Hangkong, we flew back to Beijing afterwards. You got jeok, right?
I did try it.
Oh, many times. I mean, I lived here like almost 10 years now.
Then did you arrive at the Pyongyang station?
Exactly. So we arrived around 5 p.m. and then went to a hotel and then had a kind of welcome meal. Next day we started the tour, mainly Wonsan, Pyongyang, Kaesong. I was really keen to see Wonsan because I love beaches. Curious to see like how people in North Korea like enjoy the coastline. When I uploaded my photos to Facebook afterwards, the photos from the beaches actually got a lot of attention from some of my South Korean friends. Wow, people in North Korea also enjoy the beach. It looks kind of normal. And actually the funny thing for me is like people on the beach in North Korea look much more like Europeans than South Koreans. If I go to the beach in South Korea, everyone looks like they're dressed in the Middle East. Like they're wearing like black, like even the men, they wear like the tight fitting stuff because no one wants a suntan. But in North Korea, men are just wearing shorts. Women are wearing like a bathing outfit. And that's the culture I know in Europe is the same as North Korea. We like just wear like a bathing suit. And in South Korea, it's like everyone's covering up, and to foreigners, it looks very strange in South Korea. But yeah, North Korean beach was interesting. Half the beach was for foreigners, half the beach was for Koreans, but no mixing. Just that North Korea is very strict about mixing Korean and foreign because foreign people obviously have so much more information about the outside world, and I think the government of North Korea believes it's a risk to let people talk too much because then local Koreans will learn more about, different ways of life, different political systems, etc., which is, it's unfortunate.
Then the restaurant is also divided two ways for the foreigners and for the...
Some restaurants are just for foreigners. Some restaurants are just for tourists. We went to a hotel and we just ate in a hotel restaurant. Well, that's the sad thing is many foreigners who go to North Korea don't really get an opportunity to ever really freely meet normal citizens or talk to them. You might meet some in like a bar at night in a hotel or in a shop. But generally, it's very difficult to have a conversation. If you do have a conversation, the Koreans you're speaking to may be from a very elite special authorization to talk to foreigners. Actually, the only place you can talk to them is on the train. The train journey I mentioned earlier, there's no guide on the train, there's a security official. So as a tourist, you're just freely allowed to move around the train and talk to people and there's no one like controlling it. So that was really a key reason why I got the train. And also places like the beach was also one of the places you can kind of talk to people. Friend who's Jamie Kyopo, who came to Wonsan. You know, I mentioned the divide on the beach. Well, when you go into the water, the divide ends, right? Like North Koreans swimming, and I saw he just mixed in and started talking in Korean, and that was pretty cool.
So visa or traveling, there's no restrictions?
Jamie Kyopo, they have to sign a contract which says they are not going to North Korea to try and find family members. The North Korean government doesn't want that. Overseas ethnic Koreans, when I was going, were very welcome to visit. These days, that might change, I think. Government in North Korea has become a lot more strict and controlling and paranoid and worried about outside information. Ethnic Koreans are a particular threat because they are the same ethnicity and they are aware of how much better South Korea's economy is, how much more political freedom there is in South Korea. And so for North Korea's government, that's a particular risk because it means the same kind of people coming into the country who may speak the same language and then share information about how there's such a huge divide between North and South Korea. If people in North Korea are widely aware of how developing North Korea is compared to the rest of Northeast Asia, it can actually decrease faith of citizens in their government that they're doing the right thing.
I had some conversation with North Korean. Did you got any recommendations of food in North Korea?
No. Even if you can get recommendations, because you're on a guided tour, it's really difficult to do anything because they tend to fill the schedule every day like 100%. So you're from like 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. They're taking you to all these like sites, museums, and you don't have free time to just go to a restaurant that you want to go to.
Then the restaurants or the food you have had in North Korea is actually scheduled.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you get a very distorted picture. One of the things I remember on my first trip was North Korea was widely known to be having a food shortage and not enough food to feed its own people. But every meal we went to, there was so much food, like for the tourists. And I always felt bad because maybe taking food from people who need it more. And it was way too much for like, even a hungry foreigner is way too much food. I remember like leaving food behind and looking, when we left the restaurant, I looked back at the food and I saw like one of the waitresses was like collecting all the rice and putting it into a container. I wondered if they were going to use it maybe for farming or like for some other purpose, which is, 18, I was back in North Korea for media, for journalism. We were able to leave the group and just walk with some friends who are diplomats, and the diplomats can freely go where they want. And if the journalist is with a diplomat, we can freely go where we want. So we had a really interesting walk around the city and tried some local food that way. I think you have them in South Korea as well. In the pyeonijjeom, like those tubes with the kind of sausage. It's like the one in plastic, really low quality meat inside. It really doesn't taste like meat. We had ice creams and things like that.
Then how was your first impression of real local food in North Korea?
There was a lot of MSG. In English restaurants you'd get salt, right? But they used the MSG. They didn't have the salt one, it was just MSG. In a lot of the restaurants we had it was like that. I remember I was in Kaesong and I think I got, do you know like it's called a mouth ulcer? I had that. It was really painful and it was getting bigger. And I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And then the North Korean guide was like, you need to put salt. The salt will like kill the bacteria, right? Which is true. He pulled it out and I went like that. And then I realized it was MSG. So I was putting MSG on the wound, which I don't think helped. But I also did try the boshingpang in North Korea. I knew. I had dog several times in North Korea. Like we had the kegalbi, dog ribs. Yeah, we went to Chongjin. We had like a spicy dog meat, which was quite good. And boshingtang in Pyongyang as well.
Was it local place or the foreigners restaurant?
Local one. I think it was normal. I can't remember. Maybe around $10. But foreigners pay more. They just give us different price.
Like a foreign premium.
Exactly. They call it tanggogi, and they have like huge Hangogi restaurants that just do dog meat. So it's still very popular in North Korea. Yeah, sogogi, 돼지고기, like they have it all, but chicken as well. But they use everything on the animal. So you like often get like big lumps of fat or like lumps of like cartilage, like muscle. When you're eating, it's like, you know, you're chewing. There's often like funny things that you can't swallow very easily. But yeah, also they're very into the seafood as well. Like when we went to Wonsan, it's like sokcho. You have a lot of good seafood there, like raw fish and
In North Korea, it's very hard to find the gogi.
eggs. Well, yeah, I think they, you know, for foreigners, they're always giving the best options for when you're a tourist. If you have money in North Korea, normally you can get everything you need. If you don't have money, you can't. Kind of restaurants we went to, mostly hotel restaurants. Sometimes you did see Koreans, but they looked a bit richer, you know, like big beer belly, 맥주배. But you know, on the train you meet more like diverse people. On like 길거리 음식, like that kind of food, you have everyone from like Pyongyang. One of the problems though is a lot of foreigners go to North Korea and they get food sickness. They get poisoned by the food because the food hygiene levels are very different. I got sick, maybe not too bad, but I definitely did get sick at the end of my trip. And I've seen some people who are extremely sick, like lots of vomiting. And
Then have you tried the 길거리 음식 too?
Mhm.
Or when you saw what kind of 길거리 음식 they saw?
kimbap from the street, for example. That was the only thing I remember vividly. It was before I went to South Korea, right? So I didn't know anything about Korean culture, like what kim is.
Before you came to South Korea, the image of the Korea was same.
I knew South Korea was obviously a lot richer, but being honest, I had no interest in going to South Korea for a long time. It just felt like a normal country. Like, why would I go? What could I learn? I went to North Korea 3 times before I went to South Korea. And then I went to South Korea in 2013. There just for summer, like in Jeju and Seoul. I mean, South Korea has grown on me. When I first went, it was not very remarkable. I didn't feel, oh, I want to come back here. But I did, and eventually worked here and learned a lot about, and I think you learn a lot about both Koreas. You see a lot of similarities between North and South Korea when you live here a long time, and if you visit the North a lot. At the root of this, both people are Korean, both citizens. They're just under different political systems, so there are some similarities.
Then why did you decide to come to South Korea?
2010, I was working in Washington, D.C., organization that was called Korean Economic Institute. It's like a think tank that's funded by South Korean government. I was like the communications director there, and I was running my website, NK News. So I had to suddenly make the website, put a lot of effort to try and make revenue grow so that I could support myself. But when you get fired in America, if you're a foreigner on an immigrant visa, you have to leave the country. So I had to go home to London. And then I thought I'll try and study some Korean, a Korean class that was near Nonsan. So it's like Wanjan Shigwol. I studied there for 3 months. By that point, we had a small office in Seoul with 2 of my colleagues were working there. Decision was that work was a big part because this was 2016. Trump was elected in 2017. When Trump was president, news on North Korea became #1 most important news story worldwide. It was a great place to be, so we stayed. I got married in that year, and then my wife wanted to stay in Korea. Well, it looks like I'm going to be here at least for another few years. With my work, running the website, we just started a website about South Korea as well 2 years ago. So it really is a good place to be for my work. Going back to UK would be kind of strange to run a website on Korea and be in the UK. It just doesn't really make sense, right? So
I think Korea so far.
South Korea has become my home now. I do feel at home. It's still a foreign country to me though. I still have a lot of daily difficulties because of the language and culture, and I feel overall it's good. As long as I can travel often, I'm very happy here.
Do you remember the first food in?
I actually think it was 오징어 볶음. yeah. I really like spicy food. I remember certainly in 2013 when I came to do my language program, it was 100%. It was 오징어 볶음 in a 휴게소 somewhere. It was good. I had been to a lot of Korean restaurants in Europe and America, so I knew the food well. You know, in America there's a lot of good gogijip. I really like fried chicken, so like I was excited to taste the Korean fried chicken. Korea's always had chicken as far as I know. I really like buldak, for example, like really spicy ones. Yeah, it was great tasting all of that. 10 years ago, there was not good fried chicken in the UK. It was like kind of American style, and I really enjoyed the Korean one a lot.
Whoa.
Well, yeah, what I realized the food we were often getting in North Korea was not really Korean food. What I realized was when I arrived in South Korea and seeing all the food here was the North Korean tourist company. I think they maybe worry too much about what foreigners can and can't eat. And so they adapt the menu a lot for Westerners. Kimchi is very mild. You certainly, in North Korea, foreigners wouldn't be ever given something like this in a normal kind of tourist restaurant. It's very like mingming. Yeah, it's just pretty plain, and I think they think that foreigners can't eat like spice or can't eat strong flavors, so they give a very like strange menu. So having a real Korean food was like, it was really nice. Great. Every day I can eat spicy food, and a lot of rice, a lot of plain kimchi, a piece of lightly fried fish or lightly fried pork or something like that with like a kind of batter on it, bigim style. Oh yeah, we went to origogi jip, and that was quite similar to South Korean gogi jip, but with origogi. I don't remember like doenjang, or like I don't remember having doenjang jjigae. Actually in Kaesong we did have doenjang jjigae. Yeah, I remember that. We had the boshintang in Kaesong as well. Maybe it's different here. In North Korea, in Kaesong, because me and my friend were like, let's get the boshintang, let's try it. And then the guide said, you know, if you pay extra, €5 extra, it's like you can get the, you know, the downstairs part, the gochu. I was like, seriously? So they said, yeah. And then he said, it's good for stamina. So we paid for it. Basically ate dog's dick. I remember the restaurant, there was a electricity problem. So we were in the dark. It was completely dark, and we just had like a torch, and we were looking at this soup. It was not good. So the strange thing about North Korea, at least two currency systems. So North Korean won, for North Korean people, approximately 8,000 won is $1. If you go into a restaurant that foreigners visit, the conversion is completely different. In a foreigner restaurant, $1, it might be about 121. It's extremely difficult to understand on the surface, but basically, like I explained earlier, when you see the prices in the foreigner conversion, what they're really saying is you have to pay in dollars, or you have to pay in euros. If you tried to pay with like 121, they'll just laugh and say, no, you can't do that. In contrast, the restaurants where you see the prices like, you know, tteokbokki, 8,000 won, $1. If a foreigner tries to pay $1, they'll say no. They won't accept, in fact, in those places, they won't accept the foreigner often from buying the product because it's really designed for local people. It's much cheaper. Yeah, so it's very complicated. They're not very transparent often about the exchange rate. And then another thing is that often when you're buying something as a foreigner, they often don't have enough change. Instead of giving you the exact change, they'll like give you $5 plus some chewing gum or a cigarette or something like that to make the difference.
Do they have fried chicken too?
Yeah, I had the North Korean fried chicken, and it was very, it was not so good. I might even have a photo of it here, but it was, oh yeah, here we go.
No.
That's the fried chicken in North Korea. And you can see the like yangnyeon seasoning in there, like, it was not great. We had the soju as well, which was this was unique because it very similar to South Korean design. You can see the bottle.
Yeah.
Normally, like in the past, the North Korean soju looked very different, but around 2018, they were copying the South Korean product design a lot. So for about 2 or 3 years, the designs looked very similar, but recently they've gone back like more conservative, and I think it's much more North Korean style now. There was like even ramyeon, like buldak ramyeon. It's a very similar design, chicken character. Yeah, they did a lot of, I mean, we've written articles about this that like compare the products from North and South Korea. at one point 5 years ago, they were kind of copying the South Korean design. The North Korean product designers maybe knew that this was an effective design, works well. You may have heard from talbukja, South Korean TV shows and drama series were very popular in North Korea. So if you can sell something that has a similar design to what may be appearing in the dramas, it might help. But I don't know if that's still happening. I've been to like some of the supermarkets in 백화점. Yes, maybe in some countryside areas the power situation is not so good. Having 24-hour electricity, even in Pyongyang, is difficult, except for very, elite people. I guess freezer keeps cold for a few hours. Maybe also why people get sick. Like I said, the foreigners often get sick trying North Korean food because it's not being kept very safely.